What's going on? Alex here, and today I'm answering your tax questions from Reddit. And today's question has to do with how to deal with multiple years of unfiled income tax returns and messy tax records. Let's take a look. This question comes from Cheeky Chester Maxwell, and it goes as follows. Filing past taxes, messy finances. It's been a few years since I filed taxes, possibly since 2016 or 2017, not sure. I've held jobs since 1099, W-2, but due to depression, laziness, etc., I've never filed taxes. I'm embarrassed, but I need to know how to get my stuff together and get on the right track. Well, I'm here to help you out. First step was figuring out exactly the last time I filed. I went to the IRS website to find my last transcript, but hit a dead end. I requested something via mail, which should take 5 to 10 days. Not sure if it's exactly what I need, but they don't recognize any of my credit credentials or student account. All right. I filed for an extension before the filing deadline, but probably I'll be late for this extension, and I'm hoping to get everything in order for the October deadline. I'm seeking help from my local accountant, and I explained my situation, and the secretary just said, drop off what you have and we'll take care of it. Well, that scares me a little bit because I figure I'm going to get dinged for late fees, but will they take the time to go through my deductions and any other things that could possibly reduce what I owe? I was unemployed for the better part of a year after my parents died. I'm sorry to hear that. And collected unemployment on and off from 2017 through 2020. I found the student loan my mom was paying that is now delinquent, unsure what to do with that, so I've just not paid it. I'm very lost, overwhelmed, but want to make sure I'm not screwing myself any more than I already have by just failing to file. I've called different accountants in the area and I've got a similar response. Just drop it off and we'll take care of it. Realistically, it's 3 to 4 years, and without me walking them through it, I feel like they will not get an accurate portrayal of my situation. Now, this is a very interesting question because in my practice, I deal with multiple years of unfiled returns on a pretty regular basis. So clients will come in, they haven't filed in 4 years, 5 years, sometimes even more than that, and they want to know how to get back on track. And the procedure is usually the same. We like to first get an idea of what actually was filed and what was not filed, because sometimes it's not clear in prior years if there was just an extension filed or if there was an actual return filed. So the first step is, first of all, take a breath. It's just taxes. All right, that's always step one. Then, once we've taken a breath, the next step is to really map out each year and whether there was a return filed for that year or if there's a return outstanding. And that includes federal and state, right? So for each year in question, in this case, if it's 2016, we just want to know, hey, was a federal return filed in 2016? Was a state return filed, if one is applicable for you, or you don't know? And once you map out exactly which returns have been filed and which are outstanding, then you have your plan beginning to take hold in terms of how to address all this, right? The next step is to get whatever tax records the taxpayer has for each year. Because if you have a W-2 for, let's say, 2018, send that over. If you have a 1099, send that over. That starts to paint a little bit of the tax picture in each particular tax year. Here's the caveat though. As tax professionals, what we typically do for prior year unfiled returns is we reach out to the IRS and we request transcripts ourselves on the taxpayer's behalf. Now, you mentioned that you already tried getting onto the site and requesting your transcript. Well, us tax professionals, we're so cool that we get our own phone number at the IRS that we can call to request your transcript. So a lot of these issues that you're running into in terms of trying to retrieve your transcript from the IRS website, we can bypass all of that. And this is why we're the life of every party. But aside from that, this is what allows us to get those transcripts. And importantly, the transcripts are going to tell us what income was reported in each year for you, because we can get a power of attorney from you for multiple years, which allows us to get the tax records for multiple years. And we'll see exactly what W-2s were filed, what 1099s were filed, whether they're for interest, dividends, self-employment income, 1099Bs, all that good stuff. And we basically get the IRS to show us their cards, meaning that if they have reported income, it's going to show up on the transcript. So now we already know what was reported to IRS. Then we compare that transcript to the records that you have provided. So whether it's just a W-2 here, a 1099 here, that helps us form a complete picture of what the situation was, right? Because if the IRS is reporting 100,000 in 1099 income, just let's say I'm pulling out a number here, and you are showing 1099s for 50,000, well, we'll most likely go with the higher number that the IRS is showing because some of those 1099s may have been lost or never been sent to you in the mail because they would have been filed if the IRS has it. So between what the IRS has and what you provide in terms of the documentation, those are the two major pieces that we need to file those tax returns for those prior years. The remaining piece is just getting on the phone and saying, hey, for 2018, what happened? Were you working? Were you making self-employment income? Are there any other things to take into account for each particular tax year? And we like to start with the earliest year and move forward because a lot of tax attributes, they roll forward from year to year. So if you have the prior year done, you can have that much more confidence that you're not missing anything for each subsequent year. So we'll generally start with the earliest year, let's say 2016. And if we didn't file tax returns for that point, we get the transcripts, we get whatever tax documents you have because the IRS might not have everything. Sometimes the document is mailed to the taxpayer, but it's not filed with the IRS. You know, crazy things happen. That's why we like to sort of triangulate the tax situation with the conversation that we have with our clients, the transcripts, and then any tax documents that are available. And of course, the more substantiation you have in terms of expenses and so forth, that'll even help down the line if and when any of those expenses are questioned, right? So we also work with clients in situations where they don't have records readily available. We try to work with them to say, hey, you know, it'd be really good if you can get receipts for this, this, and this to substantiate deductions, because in many cases, if you don't have the support, you may not be able to take the deduction. There are particular rules dictating when documentation is required and when it may not be necessary to have it on file to take a deduction. So a little bit of a distinction there. Either way, once we get the transcripts, once we speak with our client and understand what the situation was, and once we have the tax records for whatever tax year we're working on, that should give us a pretty good foundation to put together your tax situation. So nothing really should be missed once that process is done if the tax preparer did a diligent enough job in having a conversation and asking the right question. For example, if you were self-employed, hey, you know, what deductions did you have in 2019? And also provide some ideas as far as, hey, if you had these expenditures, those can affect your tax situation. So you may want to get the bank statement, you may want to get the invoice or so forth, substantiating that you paid those expenses, because then we can go and take that deduction for that particular tax year and do so confidently, because if it is ever questioned, we already have the proof right here, okay? And even more so, we put that documentation on file within our records and retain it, because sometimes clients, you know, they move, they do spring cleaning, those records have a tendency to grow legs. And in that case, the tax preparer will generally have it on file for longer than the average client. So that's why we ask our clients for documentation. Sometimes it's not because we're required to file it with the return. Rather, we want to have it on file just in case a letter comes through at a later time for a particular tax year. So in this situation, what I would do is just what I described. First of all, map out exactly which returns were filed and which weren't. From there, you can form the game plan, because now you know exactly which years you're attacking, so to speak, and getting the returns filed. Next step, get a power of attorney signed. It basically gives your tax preparer the ability to contact the IRS and say, hey, I'm working with so-and-so. I'd like to request the transcripts for these particular years, and the IRS sends those right over. Then we request whatever tax documents you have. And from that point, once we formed a pretty good idea of what the transcripts and the tax documents are telling us, then we have a conversation about each year and saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Let's fill in the gaps. Let's have a conversation about anything that is not obvious. And from that point, you should have the basis for a beautiful, complete, and accurate tax return for each one of these years. And what I find often is it's the procrastination that is the biggest factor in these situations, right? Because sometimes life gets a little crazy. You don't file one return, then you're still dealing with whatever issues happened, then you didn't file a second return. And after a while, it becomes a bit of a habit, and it's a problem that just keeps compounding and growing. Often, it's really a huge first step to just say, hey, you know what? I want to get in front of this and address it, because if you don't, it's just going to build and build and build and become that much more of a difficult and expensive problem to solve. There may be penalties for some of these years because we don't know the tax liability. In some years, you may be owed a refund. In some years, you may owe additional tax. So once we go through each one of those years, we should have a clear picture of, hey, you owe a total of X amount, or you're owed a refund of X amount. And that will allow you to either breathe a sigh of relief or start planning as to how you're going to address the tax liability. There's multiple avenues to deal with taxes, especially if they're for multiple prior tax years. Your tax professional should be able to guide you through the available options. Some of them might constitute an installment agreement in some cases where you pay the taxes over time, but the IRS suspends a lot of the collection actions and the nasty letters that they would normally send out if you didn't have an installment plan in place. So then you get on their radar, you're paying off the taxes over time, and it makes the situation that much more palatable in terms of dealing with it because you already handled it. It's being paid over time. There's some penalties and interest associated with it, but there's an end point to the problem. That's the important thing. The longer you go with unfiled returns, it just gets uglier and it can affect more aspects of your life, especially when the taxing authorities get wind of this, they catch you, and then they're just going to send letters that are nastier and nastier and nastier. Then they can put liens on your assets, seize assets. It can get ugly real quick. And also, the longer you wait, then it generally is that much more expensive to deal with, right? And as you get those nasty letters, they're going to have due dates on them that are very short period of time from when you receive the letter. So there's not going to be a big window there. And from that point, you may end up looking down the barrel of a gun kind of, and you're stuck dealing with a situation and you don't have a lot of time to actually work through the different alternatives that are available. So moral of the story, address it as soon as possible. Don't wait. Don't let multiple years pile up. But if they have, that's okay. Understand that there are ways to address it, and there's a plan of action to address pretty much any situation and get you current with your taxes. So hopefully, Cheeky, Chester, Maxwell, this helps shed some light on all this craziness. And with that, of course, I hope this video was helpful. I also want to take a moment to thank all the additional subscribers that signed on to the channel. Thank you so much. There will be more videos coming as soon as I dig myself out of the workload that I'm currently under. I miss you guys. I can't wait to see you. Drop some comments down below if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And overall, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching.